Welcome to episode 6 of Black and Gold Weekly. I am your host here, John, and we are joined by a very special guest today. First reoccurring guest on the show that we've had so far. It's Mr. Danny Jaillet. He was here for episode 1. He's back here now into the Bruins season for a couple weeks. They've had a really good start to the season, so I'm excited to hear Danny's take on the Bruins so far. Danny, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
It's crazy. This is episode 6, and I was back on episode 1. Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Back when we did our first show here, we just talked about the Bruins off season. The season hadn't started yet, and now we're a few weeks into the year. We're into February, and Boston's off to a hot start. There's certainly plenty to talk about with this Bruins team. There's so much to get into this week, so I'm really, really excited.
Absolutely, me too. And these games haven't been for the faint of heart as of late, but hey, they're getting the job done. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get into things here, I just want to remind everyone to please check out the 3 links down in the description. We have one link for Boston Bruins gear. We have another link for all NHL gear, no matter what team you want, and a third link for NCAA college gear. All of those are down in the description. Please check them out if you're looking for any of that kind of stuff. Hats, shirts, hoodies, jerseys, whatever you need, all can be found at any of those 3 links. If you want college stuff, there's a link there. If you want any other NHL team, there's a link there. If you want Boston Bruins, that's the first link down there. And it would really, really be appreciated if you check those links out for sure. But getting into things now, Danny, I don't even know where to start with this episode. There's so much to talk about. But I guess the big thing that comes to mind is these Boston Bruins this past week, certainly, and really this season, have been the comeback kids. And whether you call them, I've seen a bunch of different names on Twitter, Kodiak kids, comeback kids, cardiac kids, whatever you want to call them. How about these comebacks?
These comebacks have been something that have been absolutely crazy. I mean, when you look at how they've been playing and the fact that they've lost key veterans in the offseason in Chara and Krug, it's almost like they haven't skipped a beat. And one of the things we talked about in the first show was how was this team going to do without the point guard in Torrey Krug on the power play. And they started off slow. They had a little scoring drought. But other than that, they've looked very good on the power play so far.
Yeah, absolutely unreal power play. Penalty kill has also been incredible this season. They are once again one of the best special teams in the NHL at both ends of the ice. It's been phenomenal, and man, just these last few games, down 3 goals to Washington in the first game, they come back and end up forcing overtime. They lose in OT, but they still steal a point out of that game. Second game against Washington, they find themselves down by 3 goals again. They come all the way back and win that one. And then last night against the Philadelphia Flyers, which was just absolutely insane, they're down 2 goals in the third period, and they come back and win it in overtime 4-3. I mean, what resiliency from this team, and what an ability to come back in games against their top opponents in the division that they're in the East.
Absolutely. And when I look at those 2 games against Washington, if the Bruins are Superman, Washington's been their kryptonite over the last several years.
Yep.
And to get, points out of both games against Washington after being down was huge, especially when you talk about the youth on this roster and kind of some of the new faces in new spots in the lineup. This Washington team is never easy to contend with, no matter if you have, an all-star team or all of your best players, never mind, lineup shuffles and changes. So that, to me, those games against Washington were huge. And then last night, against Philadelphia, Pastrnak absolutely exploded, and we'll get to him in a little bit.
Yes.
But it's just been absolutely crazy. I mean, I remember we were sitting again on the first episode, and we were thinking, well, what's this team going to look like? Are they going to get scoring? Is it going to be, Are they going to put themselves in a hole early by losing a bunch of games? And so far, it hasn't been pretty, but that's the sport of hockey. It's never pretty, but if you can get the job done, that's all that matters.
Yeah, absolutely. And right now, the Bruins are certainly getting the job done. Now, one thing I will say, I don't know if this is a position that you want to be in a lot over the course of the season where you're having to come back from these large deficits to
Mm-hmm.
win. Getting down by 2 or 3 goals in every game is generally not a
Yeah.
winning formula in the NHL. But man, to have the ability to come back, have the confidence, and to know that you're capable of coming back like that means that you are never really out of it any game, any night of the week. You are never out of it.
Yeah, and I do not want to see them continue to have to come back, but I think these games in particular are going to be really important as the races get closer towards the end of the season and, games in hand and stuff like that and points. Like these games over the past week or so could make the difference between an entirely, different seed numerically
Mhm.
and put the Bruins in better positions to succeed moving forward. So, although I don't want to see them, like you said, continue to have to come back, these wins have been huge, I think, in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. Pulling points out of these games that, quite honestly, particularly the first couple Washington games, they had no business pulling points out of. Like those were going to be losses, and for them to get points out of those games, especially against the Capitals, who, like you brought up, historically over the past 6, 7 years, the Bruins have really struggled against Washington. They have been the Bruins' kryptonite. They have not been able to win many games against the Caps. And for them to get a point out of that first game and then come back all the way to win the second game, just absolutely incredible. And that is really going to help this team long term, I think, when it comes to playoff positioning, playoff seed, and potential playoff matchup. Because every point matters so much this year in the shortened season, and obviously you don't have as much time to make up points if you're not getting them early in the year, and also every game is within the division, so points
Yeah.
mean even more in that regard as well. So I completely agree, it's huge for Boston to be picking up points in these games.
Yeah, and I think it's also going to teach them come playoff time, playoff atmosphere and playoff adversity in that type of environment, which I think is going to be huge for this team as they grow moving forward. They're gonna, if if they make the playoffs, I don't want to say any guarantees that they will yet, but they're gonna have to face adversity and face tough teams, and they're gonna be knocked down. And I hate to sound cliche, but if you get knocked down, you want to get back up in these games, and so far the Bruins have been able to do so.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And you don't want to say it, but I'll say it. The Boston Bruins are definitely making the playoffs this year. If they don't make the playoffs, it will be an absolute epic just collapse and brutal season that I would want heads to roll at that point if they somehow don't make the playoffs this year. They're off to a tremendous start in their first, what have they played now, 10 games?
Yeah.
Um, so I'm fully expecting the Boston Bruins to be in the playoffs this year, but that last little bit that we were talking about and the importance of getting points really segues into this next topic here. The Bruins right now are at the top of the standings in the East Division with that win over Philadelphia last night. As we take a look at the standings here, Boston has played 10 games. They are 7-1-2 with 16 points. They've played one less game with than Philadelphia, who also has 16 points. And Washington does have the potential to retake first place tonight, which is Thursday. By the time that this show comes out on Friday, Washington may have jumped back into first. If they get a win over the New York Rangers tonight, they will then have 17 points, so they'd be in first by a point, but with one more game played than the Bruins. But either way, no matter what happens with that Washington game tonight, the Boston Bruins are at or near the top of the standings in the East Division. And they are looking like one of the better teams in the league, one of the best teams in the league again this season. Again, only one regulation loss so far in their first 10 games. How impressed are you with the Bruins being this good to start the year? And was this something you expected, or are they, outperforming what you expected them to do so far?
They're definitely outperforming what I expected them to do so far. I expected them to get into a little bit of a groove, but not this early. I thought this first month or so would be dedicated to growing pains and trying to figure things out. And yet, not only are the Bruins winning, but, and this was something that I had read in various articles, Don Sweeney is trying to rebuild on the fly, and can he do it? And I think so far the answer has been yes, and that's huge for the team moving forward because once, and I hate to even think about this, but Bergeron, Marchand, and even Pasta to some extent, even though he's only 24, retire, they're going to need to have a sort of surplus of talent and some depth, and I think we're seeing that right now. And I will say this: I think Bruce Cassidy tends to really connect with the younger players and get the most out of them, and I think it's really showing, his coaching skills that he's been able to seemingly to be able to maximize their talent so far.
Yeah, for sure. And you brought up Bruce Cassidy. I want to touch on him a little bit. Bruce Cassidy won Coach of the Year last year, Jack Adams Award winner. The Bruins obviously were the President's Trophy winning team, but I didn't think Cassidy was not my pick for the Jack Adams last year. I did not think that he really deserved that because with that Boston roster, I mean, obviously Cassidy's a great coach, and I don't want to take anything away from
Yeah.
him because he's done a phenomenal job with this team. But with that Boston roster, I think a lot of coaches could have won the President's Trophy with that Bruins roster last year. I think the job that Cassidy is doing this season, with all of the injuries, with losing Krug and Chara off the back end, having so many young players in the lineup, I think this has been a much better coaching job for Cassidy this season so far than what he had to do last year. Because let's face it, that Bruins team last year, they should have been a first place team. They should have been a top of the league level team, and they were, which is great. But I thought that, last year there were some other coaches who really brought teams that had no business being playoff teams into playoff contention. Um, Whereas this season, Bruce Cassidy, what he has done this year has been incredibly impressive, and I think it's much more of a Jack Adams job that he's done this season than what he did last year.
Yeah, and I think with these awards tend to look at things numerically and
Mm-hmm.
the sexy stuff like who's first in the standings,
Yep.
who's first in the conference, and they tend not to go as much in depth like, okay, coach X had this roster and yet he managed to get the most out of them. If there was a year that Bruce Cassidy should win the Jack Adams award, to this point it should be this year. I
Yep.
mean, do you think we could see back to back Jack Adams award winning coach Bruce Cassidy?
I don't know if the voters will give that to him, but I mean again, I think what he's doing this year is far more impressive than what he did last year. I mean, to
I
have
agree.
the losses out of that lineup that they did, to have these young players coming in, and have the injuries that they're dealing with to start this year piled on top of it. This is a far superior coaching job for Cassidy than last season, and he is just, I mean, the fact that he's able to get this team to this level with all of these things going on is just absolutely remarkable to me.
Yeah, and even I kind of had the first inkling that he could do this right after the Bruins fired Claude Julien.
Hmm.
Because if you recall, the Bruins were kind of in the middle of a slump. It was February. They fired Claude Julien conveniently during the Patriots Super Bowl parade, and this team was just kind of bleh. And then they
Yep.
went on a tear, and I forget who they lost to that year. I think it was Montreal. Was it No, it was who did they play in the first round? I'm trying to remember. Anyway, he
They didn't
led them
make.
to,
I don't believe they made the playoffs that year.
I think,
That was one of the 2 years that they didn't make the playoffs. I think I'd have to
I
do a
think it was 27.
quick history lesson here.
Yeah,
On the fly history lesson here.
because Sean Corrali scored an overtime winning goal.
Oh, that was Ottawa. That was the year
That's
against
what it was.
Ottawa. Then.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, so they did come back. They did end up making the playoffs that year. Yes. Um, they fired him in 2017. Okay.
Yeah, so that was the first real,
Yep.
inkling that I got that, hey, Cassidy may be able to work with the young guys and get something out of these young players. And I've been impressed that he's been able to continue to try to coach to their strengths instead of kind of resting on his laurels, so to speak, and just going through the motions of being a coach.
Yeah, absolutely. And Cassidy's always had a really good effect on this team since taking over the team. I was a big fan of Claude Julien as well, and obviously now he's doing a great job with the Montreal
Yeah.
Canadiens as they're one of the top teams in the league as well. But I thought at the time it was certainly time to move on. The Bruins did not make the playoffs in 2015 and 2016. And then then they ended up bringing Cassidy, and they made it in 2017. Lost in the first round to Ottawa, but Ottawa ended up going to the Eastern Conference Finals that year, so really no shame in that. And
Yeah.
Julian moved on to become the Canadiens head coach for the second time, and he's had a lot of success there. But yeah, I think Bruce Cassidy has done a phenomenal job since taking over as coach of the Bruins. But I think this year is his best coaching job so
Yeah.
far. And if the Bruins keep playing like this, and they end up being a top of the league level team, maybe not finishing first in the NHL, but first in the division, this will certainly be his best coaching job, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He certainly has to be considered. Like we said, who knows if the voters will give him back-to-back awards, but
Yeah.
time will tell.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So over the past week, obviously Boston has had a very good week. Points in all of their games. They lost to overtime to Washington. Then they came back and beat Washington, and then last night they beat the Philadelphia Flyers. The point streak continues for the Bruins, but I want to ask you: is there any player that's really standing out to you as playing really well over this past week and been a standout star in your opinion?
Not a standout star, but Trent Frederick. I really like what he brings to the table in terms of physicality.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that he had the, fortitude or the balls, whatever you want to say, to go after Tom Wilson in
Yep.
Washington, that certainly takes a lot of guts. And because this team has, a ton of scoring talent and they have a ton of players who can make pretty passes and score pretty goals. What I've thought they've lacked over the past couple of years is someone that is willing to throw down the gloves and kind of do that consistently. But
Mm-hmm.
Frederick has really impressed me in what he has been able to do. And I think if the Bruins can get a nice mix of toughness and scoring, then they'll finally have that balance that they've been trying to achieve for the past couple of years.
Yeah, I completely agree about Trent Frederick. I've been ranting and raving about this guy all season. I think he fits in so well in that bottom six there and brings that element that the Bruins haven't really had in a while where with Kevin Miller missing most of the last two seasons, you lose his physicality and his toughness off the back end. Adam McQuaid, it's been a while since he's been in Boston. Sean Thornton, he left even longer ago. So the Bruins really haven't had that true physical. I mean, Wagner's physical, he hits, and Wagner will drop the gloves, but he's not an overly big guy. You're not going to see Wagner taking on the biggest and toughest guys in the league. Corrali doesn't really fight that much. He's a physical player. He hits, but he doesn't fight all that often. They really haven't had that tough guy in the lineup, and Trent Frederick is a tough guy.
Yep.
Obviously, seeing him drop the gloves with Wilson. I was worried. I was warning people a little bit. Like I know Frederick's a physical guy, but Wilson's a big bite to try and take there. Because Wilson's one of the toughest guys left in the NHL, but Frederick really held his own in that fight, and I was really excited to see that. And I think he is bringing a great physical element to the bottom six that the Bruins needed, like you said, in their lineup. And I really hope he stays in the lineup because he has been awesome so far, in my opinion.
Yeah, he has. And, to think he only has more room to grow is really
Yep.
exciting. I think we're really going to find out not just Frederick, but a lot about this team over the past couple of months. And I've liked the returns on a lot of the younger players. And I remember us talking in the first episode. Oh man, Frederick, Grizzlick's going to have to play. What's going to happen? We don't know. Now we're starting to figure it out. And not only are we starting to figure it out, but we're seeing that some of the names that we were worried about in the first episode
Yep.
are really stepping up to the challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. Fredericks looked good. The guys on the back end, Grizzlick. I mean, obviously he's injured now, but he when he was playing fairly well. Saboral, I think, has looked really solid on the back end. Um,
Lazon.
Lausanne's done well as well. You know, he had a little bit of a rough start, but now he's really, I think, settled in. So I completely agree with you on that. These questions that we had about the Bruins are being answered and being answered in a very, very good way so far.
Absolutely, and it's great to see because one of my biggest complaints, and I'm not saying the Bruins are going to be Tampa Bay, but when we played Tampa Bay or teams like Washington in the past, we were very slow, and
Hmm.
our age in certain positions, especially defensively, pre McAvoy and guys like that, started to show, and now we're seeing the young kids make young kid mistakes, but they at least have the stamina and energy to keep up with some of the faster teams in the league. And I think that's a great direction for the Bruins to be trending moving forward.
Yeah. So we brought this guy up earlier. This is my pick for player playing really, really well over the past week. We brought him up earlier, and that is David Pastrnak.
Mhm.
What an unbelievable return to the lineup for David Pastrnak. He's only played the past 3 games. He has 5 goals already, including a hat trick last night against Philadelphia. To basically, he's the reason the Bruins won the game. And even though Bergeron scored the game winner, the only reason Boston was even in that game offensively was because of Pasta. And then he also has a couple of assists for 7 points in 3 games to start this season for David Pastrnak. Coming back from offseason hip surgery, absolutely unbelievable start. He is my top player playing really well right now for Boston. This guy is unbelievable. He's going to be up there with one of the best players in the NHL right now.
I'm convinced that David Pastrnak is not a man, but a machine. I mean, you look at what he has been able to do just since coming back. It's like he's put up production that have equaled some players, entire seasons in the past couple of years. So it's like it's like he never missed a beat, and it's great to see him be able to come back in a very tight conference, in a very tight race with a lot of competitive games and play at a high level. I mean, he looks really comfortable, and especially last night, he got off some quick shots. He knew where to be on the ice,
Hmm.
and he was able to kind of draw the defense in because the defense was starting to be worried about Pasternak, which opened up opportunities for some of the other guys on the ice, almost like a LeBron James or a NBA superstar. He kind of draws that attention and that opens up opportunities for other people. And I'm very impressed by what he has been able to do so far.
Yeah, absolutely. He's looked great since coming back. There was definitely a little bit of rust in that first game back, and obviously that's expected, but the energy was there and the jump was there in his step. And I talked about that on the last Bruins Breakdown podcast. Shout out to those guys, Leon and Ryan at Bruins Breakdown, another great podcast. It's part of the Black and Gold Productions network here that this show is also in partnership with. So a little shout out there to those guys. Thank you so much for having me on. And we talked about Pastrnak during that episode, and the jump was there, the energy was there. He looked like David Pastrnak on the ice. There was definitely some rust as far as the stick handling and the shooting was concerned in that first Washington game. But then by the second Washington game, he started scoring. He got the puck in the net, and all of a sudden it just clicked. And David Pastrnak is now back to looking like he is firing on all cylinders. And what a huge get for the Bruins to get him back into the lineup.
Yeah, and I don't want to make excuses, but especially when you think about last season, you play until March, then you have a huge break, and then
Mhm.
you're asked to play again in August. That throws everybody's timing off. And at
Yep.
the tail end of last season, combined with his injuries, Pasta didn't look like himself.
Yep.
Now he looks like himself. He's healthy. He's presumably gotten into a more of a solid routine,
Yep.
and it's all coming together on the ice.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been super impressed with Pasta since he's come back. And who hasn't? I mean, 7 points in 3 games. You literally cannot ask for more than that. That is an insane rate of scoring so far. Obviously, he's not going to keep up at 2.33 points per game all season long, but
You can
what a
hope.
return for David Pastrnak.
Absolutely, and I just hope he saves some of this for the playoffs. But
Yeah, certainly. Would love to see him perform this well in the postseason and really help lead the Bruins to a deep run this year. But Now I want to look at the other side of things. We talked about some guys that are playing well and just some great things so far from the Bruins. What do you think about is there anyone that's kind of not played well in your opinion over the past week or so? Some guys that really you haven't liked what you've seen. It's hard because this team's played so well and they're winning and they're getting points out of every game. So I don't think anyone's really standing out as horrible for the most part, but is there anyone that hasn't been playing great and you want to see more from?
Jake DeBrusk. I mean, I know he's out with an injury right now, but he only has one assist on the season in 6 games played. He's had 0 shots on goal in his last 5 games, and we talk about the Pasta, Marchand Bergeron, and again, I hate to keep referring back to this, but we talked about this in the first podcast. We need that secondary scoring,
Mm-hmm.
and DeBrusk is a player who we said was very up and down and needed to be consistent. And injuries aside, not saying that his injuries don't matter, but just in terms of pure production, he has not produced at a high level right now.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he's still getting kind of acclimated and getting his feet wet, but it's frustrating to watch when we know the kind of potential and skill set he brings to the table. I was really hoping he'd at least have a couple more points by now and a
Yep.
goal or two, but he's got to step it up in order to help the Bruins with that secondary scoring. There have been other players, which we'll probably get into a little bit later, who have provided that, but it's just frustrating with the talent that he has. He's just, hasn't been able to put it together consistently.
Yeah, I mean, obviously DeBrusque is out now with an injury,
Yeah.
and the good news is that he is back skating on his own. He's not cleared for team practices yet, but he is back skating on his own. So hopefully a return is nearing for Jake DeBrusque, and
And
uh,
Matt Grzelcyk, I heard too.
yeah, Grzelcyk as well is on his way back. But Jake DeBrusque needs to get himself on the score sheet when he comes back. When he
Yeah.
gets back from this injury, he has got to start producing. Because, like you said, only one assist on the season. This is a guy that we know has the potential and has the ability. He can be a 20-plus goal scorer consistently in the NHL. He can be a 40 to 50 point guy in the NHL. He just hasn't been able to put it all together except for that one season in 2018-19. And I was really hoping that this was going to be a big year for DeBrusque. So far, it hasn't been. But hopefully, when he gets back from this injury, he's able to get himself going and really start producing for the Bruins.
I know, and when we talk about the Bruins 2015 draft class, he's been kind of the crown jewel at the moment in terms of production, and right now it's just not there. So I'm hoping, if it's the kind of thing where he's kind of not at his best, from January to February, but he heats up in March and March and April, then I'm okay with that. But he hasn't really been able to show that he can turn it on when he's struggling. He's either been very hot with a lot of hot stretches or
Hmm.
very cold where he can't seem to do anything.
Yeah.
So I just hope he's able to turn it on when it matters, but I'm not confident that he can at this point in time right now. Obviously, when he is healthy and comes back.
Yeah, for sure. So for me, the players kind of to me that haven't played out well is the guys that have got pushed into the lineup because of all these injuries. Carson Kuhlman, and then last night it was Anton Bleed, and have not been impressed with the performances of either of those guys. There's a lot of guys out right now. Studnik is on IR. DeBrusque, as we've been talking about, is out with an injury right now. Andre Kosh is out with an injury, and that has allowed some of these guys who are not everyday NHL players to get an opportunity to get into the lineup and maybe show their worth to the organization and earn some playing time and really show that they can maybe be an NHL player. And Kuhlman did absolutely nothing in the 2 games that he played. He was invisible out there. And then Anton Bleed last night. I was excited to see Anton Bleed get into the lineup, and I tweeted about it on the BNG account. Please follow on Twitter if you're not. BNG Weekly. I was excited to see Bleed get into the lineup because he's an energy player, and he's a guy who really plays with a lot of jump. He can be physical, he can hit, and I didn't notice him at all last night. He didn't bring any of that. And then I got really ticked off in the third period when the Bruins were trying to come out of their zone. They get it over the blue line. Bleed is coming up ice, and rather than getting the puck deep, he ends up losing it, and Philadelphia comes back on a break the other way,
Yeah.
and it really cost the Bruins, and he couldn't even get the puck deep. And I was like, at that point, I was like, that's it. I've seen enough of Anton Bleed. And I've just been really disappointed with these guys because they are trying to earn NHL jobs. They're trying to prove that they belong in an NHL lineup, and they're getting a great opportunity with all of these injuries, and they're not even coming close to taking advantage of it. So I've been disappointed with Kuhlman and Bleed. Did not really see anything from them, and I think it's time to move on to the next guy and give someone else a chance. Maybe Zach Senyshyn. As much as I'm not a Senyshyn fan and don't think he's ever really going to be a full-time NHL player, at least give the kid a shot, because the guys that you are bringing up aren't showing us anything either. So you might as well just keep plugging guys until somebody earns a spot.
Yeah, now's the chance to show with these injuries whether or not you belong on the roster. And those two, like you said, they did not put forth a good showing. If last night was a test, then they failed.
Yep.
And I get that in some respects it might be tough to be thrown into the fray and learning on the fly and stuff like that. But, at the end of the day, you got to make the most of your opportunities. And that sounds so cliche, but, you know,
It's the
they,
truth.
yeah, they need to be able to get the job done, and they need to be able to show that they can help out this team, or else it's, next man up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think that it's time to put someone else. I mean, Kuhlman in his 2 games, nothing there. Bleed, not impressive last night. So it's time for the next man up, like you said, and to give someone else a shot. Maybe Zach Senyshyn. Maybe you just put Par Lindholm back in and hope that he just fills a spot until somebody's able to come back. I don't know. But I was not impressed with Kuhlman or Bleed and their inability to take advantage of the opportunity that they were given.
Yeah, and some of those names like Par Lindholm and Zach Senyshyn made me cringe a little bit, but I mean, you have to do what you have to do, and thankfully this team has enough depth at the top to where they can kind of mask
Hmm.
these issues. But you know, once the playoffs start, nothing is masked anymore. It's all out in the open.
Yep.
Gonna do whatever it takes to win, and like I said, if these guys can't get it done in a regular season game, then they're sure as heck not going to be able to get it done in the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope that we start getting some guys back from injury, because in a perfect world, none of these guys would even be close to an NHL lineup. And the Bruins would have a full, healthy roster, and we wouldn't have to worry about these guys getting opportunities because Boston would have their actual NHL complement of players there. But so hopefully DeBrusk is back somewhat soon. Hopefully Studnicka is able to get back here within a reasonable amount of time. Kasha, that looks like another concussion issue with him, and he's had a long history of that. So who knows what the timetable on that is going to be. But I just hope that the Bruins start to get some of these NHL regulars back so we don't have to worry about Carson Kuhlman or Anton Bleed being in the NHL lineup.
Yeah, and when you look at, a guy like Jack Studnicka, he's really been able to come on to the scene after starting off slow,
Mm-hmm.
and having that young spark is crucial because again, we talk about secondary scoring and
Yep.
who can kind of provide that energy. And he hasn't been perfect, but I feel like he never takes a shift off. He's always trying to create plays at the front of the net. He's always trying to get to the front of the net. He's always at least trying to shoot. And I remember, I believe it was the Philadelphia game that you did with Steel Flyers,
Mm-hmm.
actually, when when he just kind of broke out after starting out slow. And
Yep.
I'm hoping he can continue on that same trajectory because his energy is definitely missed. Yeah, the Bruins have other scores and things like that, but guys like Studnicka and even Frederick, who can provide both the physicality and the energy to this roster, are definitely important.
Yeah, and Studnicka was playing so well after that slow start. Once he got his first goal, he really started to get going, and he was playing so well before that unfortunate injury. And I really hope he can pick up where he left off when he comes back, because Jack Studnicka, I think, is the Bruins' best prospect right now. And he is my favorite of all of the young players as far as like upwards potential and potentially a top 6 player. I love Trent Frederick. Frederick's been my favorite guy down in Providence, but I see Frederick more as a third line guy in the long term. Whereas Studnicka, I think, absolutely is going to be a top 6 player for Boston, and has so much potential. I really hope that he can pick up where he left off because he was playing great. Um, but now, another question here for you, changing things up a little bit. But just so far this season, what has been your favorite thing that you've seen, or just about this Bruins team that that's really got you happy and excited about the Bruins this year?
It's gonna sound so cliche, but the fact that they've been able to get the job done in overtime is huge for me because
And
that was the
shootouts as well. They finally winning shootouts.
yeah, overtime and shootouts, like that's been huge for me because they haven't been able to do that at all over the past couple of seasons.
Hmm.
And sure, it's nice to get a point in regulation, but you always want to seal the deal in overtime. And I remember texting you like last season, oh boy, here goes another overtime loss, or oh boy, here goes another overtime shootout. And yet they've risen to the challenge this year, and that's something that really excites me about this team. Kind of like their resiliency to come back after
Hmm.
being down 4 goals or something like that. They continue to fight. They continue to plug away. They know that they're not going to get 5 goals in one shift, but they continue to just chip away and play hard. And I think that chipping away and playing hard mentality has really kind of carried over into the shootouts and into the overtime games.
Yeah, absolutely. It's huge when you can pull out overtime and shootout wins. And like you said, Boston, particularly in the shootout over the past couple seasons, had been abysmal in the shootouts. Like probably worst in the league out of any team in shootouts over the past couple years. So far this year, it's been the complete opposite. They've been one of the best shootout teams, and they're finding ways to win. And that's huge. Think of how many extra points that is. An OT loss, shootout loss, only 1 point versus the win, which gets you 2. How many extra points are the Bruins picking up because they're able to win in overtime and because they're able to finally win shootouts?
It's crucial, and you talk about playing until the final whistle. While the Bruins have continued to do that, and
Mm-hmm.
like I said about the Washington and the Philadelphia games this week, these are the types of games, shootouts and overtime wins, that are going to be huge when it comes down to the final stretch and playoff time. Because this division is very crowded with talented teams, and some teams still haven't found their stride yet. The Bruins are getting the job done both against division rivals and in these overtime and shootout games, and are hopefully putting themselves in a good position moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And that's been a great thing to see is their ability to pick up those points in OT and the shootouts, and it really is going to mean a lot in the standings come the end of the season. Now, my thing is kind of more of a coaching slash strategic thing that I've seen, but I've really liked this, and it's the 5 forwards on the power play,
That's right.
which I first noticed this in the first Washington game, which I was
Yep.
actually streaming during on my Off the Wall Hockey channel. And I noticed it, and I was like, wait a second, do they have 5 forwards out there? Because I had never seen that before. 4 forwards is a common thing, and I think if I was a coach, I would do 4 forwards and one D-man on the power play. But I don't ever remember seeing 5 forwards on the power play like that before. And then I look out there during the game, and you've got Krejci at the point, you've got Pasta and Marchand manning the top of the circles, you've got Bergeron in his bumper position, and then Nick Ritchie is the net front guy, and I'm like, wait a second, they've got 5 forwards and no defenseman on the ice right now, and it worked. It's been working for the Bruins. Um, they're scoring a lot on the power play, and I just absolutely love Cassidy's ability to just kind of go outside of the box and try something different, try something unconventional, and it is paying off for the Bruins.
Yeah, Cassidy said, you know what? I'm going to do this. And that's exactly what he did. I mean, it makes sense when you just think about putting your best scoring players or your best, puck possession players on the ice, but the lack of a defenseman could scare away some coaches. I like what he's doing here because it allows them to get that extra spark, and it allows them to put some of their best skill players on the ice at one time. And I think, against teams like Washington and stuff like that, where it seems like they have a skilled player on almost every single line, the Bruins are going to need that extra boost, and they certainly got it on starting on Saturday, and that helped them get that 1 point from the overtime finish.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also Cassidy's picking his spots with it. They're doing it when they're down in games, which obviously when you're down by a goal or two or three in the case of Washington, um, when you're down that much, you need that extra offense and you know that you need a goal on this power play opportunity. So you want your absolute best offensive players out of there. And I think it's a great trick to kind of have up your sleeve and a great thing that you're able to pull out there when you're down in a game and desperately need to score. You have that ability to put five forwards out there on the power play. And then you can run a more normal power play in a tie game, or if you have the lead where you really don't want to be giving up shorthanded goals. Obviously, you never want to give up shorthanded goals, but when you're losing, you trade some of that defensive structure for trying to score. That you wouldn't do in any other situation. And I think you're right. I think some coaches would be scared away from going five forwards just because of not having a defenseman out there and the possibility of giving up a shorthanded goal. But if you pick your spots with it and do it at the right time, it can be really, really effective, and the Bruins are showing that.
Absolutely, and it seems like today's NHL is all about offense and about players with speed and about players who can move with the puck, not just a defenseman that can stand there and deliver hits. And the Bruins have been able to use that power play formula, I guess you could say, and really work it to their advantage. And it'll be interesting to see how often they use it come playoff time, and if they use it a little bit more frequently against some of these more high-powered offensive teams.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And the one last thing here I want to go over before we start looking ahead to some upcoming games for the Bruins is the fact that the Bruins are winning despite having all of the injury issues that we've talked about throughout this episode. The word resiliency has come up a lot, and just the resiliency to win overtime and shootout games, the resiliency to come back in games where you're down by multiple goals and still able to score and tie it up and even get wins in those games. And now the resiliency to have so many guys out of the lineup and still be able to pull points out of all of these games, win most of these games. Like we said, they're 7-1-2 to start the year. Even without Jake DeBrusk, even without Matt Grzelcyk, without Andre Kasha, without Jack Studnicka. I mean, they've got major players out of the lineup, and they are still finding ways to win games. How huge is that?
That's enormous because it's all about the points. And when you think about, you know, teams tend to get very scared when some of the top players come out of the game. It seems like the Bruins have almost not embraced it, but said, okay, these guys are hurt. Here's what we have to do to win. And I think that sort of speaks to the job that Bruce Cassidy has done coaching, because I feel like he says, player X, do this and only focus on this, and you can help us win this game. I feel like he doesn't put a ton of pressure on his players to succeed and rather just lets them play the game, which is huge. And, it just shows that there's a system that's working. There's a system that's working. It's worked for the last 4 years. And whether it's encouraging players, simplifying, roles on the ice, simplifying formations, plays, whatever it shows that there's a system in place that does work, that can work with multiple lineups, that can work with a ton of injuries, and you know it'll be interesting to see how they can continue to improve on the system and work within the system, especially because injuries are probably going to be a big thing for everybody moving forward with the shortened season and the back-to-back games and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about Cassidy's system, and they just seem to be able to move guys around that lineup, plug guys in where they need to, and they're still able to produce.
Hmm.
Um, and, we've seen a lot of guys on different lines and have different line mates already this season because of all the injuries. And, they're still performing and they're still getting production out of the guys that they need to get production out of. The defense is still holding up very, very well. Um, they're getting pretty solid goaltending. Obviously, that first game against Washington wasn't Tuukka Rask's best night, but they still were able to get a point out of it. And I think the goaltending overall has been very good to start the year. The defense has been very good, and they find ways to get the job done. And I think that's one of the biggest characteristics of this Bruins team that we've seen so far this year is that no matter what adversity is thrown their way, no matter what happens, they are finding ways to get the job done.
And at the end of the day, that's all it's about. It doesn't have to be, sexy wins by 5 goals. It just has to be enough to get the job done and then move on to the next game. And especially with this roster, I could definitely see the confidence growing on the ice. They seem very comfortable. And when you combine that with the veterans like Marchand and Pasternak, and then you have the younger players like Studnicka, it's really interesting to see how the system benefits everybody, not just the veteran players or not even just the younger players. It benefits everybody, and it's putting everybody in positions to succeed. And I think the confidence, especially after losing Krug and Chara in the offseason, I think the confidence is definitely starting to really grow for the Bruins.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And they are rolling right now. As we said, they got points in all three games this past week. Two of them were wins. All of them were come from behind games where they were able to get a point while being down by 3 goals to Washington in the first game. Get a point out of that with the OT loss. Down 3 goals to Washington again in the second game, and they come all the way back to win that one. And then down by a couple of goals in the third period to Philadelphia last night, and they're able to come back and win that game in overtime as well, which is absolutely huge. Um,
They don't panic. That's what it is. They don't panic at all. They just continue to play the game and chip away and get shots on net, and they seem they seem relaxed, which doesn't mean that they don't take it seriously, but they know what they need to do, and they know how to get it done, and they just continue to focus on playing their game. Don't try to hit the home run, so to speak, and get 5 goals on one shift, but they don't panic. They just relax, and then they just continue to chip away.
Yeah, there's no panic in this team and there's no give up in this team. And even when they're down, they still have that believability and they still have that confidence that they can come back. And this team, I mean, the way that they've looked so far, if they keep this up, they are never going to be out of a game until the clock strikes zero because they just no matter how much they're losing by, they just continue to chip away and continue to fight to get back into the game, and they never give up at all. And I have not seen this team have any quit in it at all this season, which is absolutely phenomenal to see. Another great characteristic.
Yeah, I'd rather see a team lose but play hard than to win and just kind of go through the motions. And that type of grit and toughness is crucial, especially come playoff time. I hate to keep saying come playoff time, but it's true. This type of poise for a young team is great to see, and hopefully they can continue that, especially as each game means more and the schedule advances.
Yeah, absolutely. And you keep bringing up come playoff time, and there's no need to apologize about that because that's what it's about for this Bruins team. The regular season is just a stepping stone to get to the playoffs for the Boston Bruins. It's not about winning the regular season. It's not about, I mean, obviously we want them to win. We want them to have a great regular season, but that's not the end goal here. The Bruins are not a rebuilding team just trying to be better and trying to get into the playoffs. The Bruins are a cup contender, and their goal every single year with this core group is to win the Stanley Cup. So it is all about the playoffs, and it is about what they're able to do come playoff time because the regular season is just a stepping stone to get to the postseason for the Boston Bruins, and that is what really counts is when they come into the playoffs. And if they are able to play like this and bring these characteristics into the postseason, then I think they have a really good shot of making a deep run this year.
I do too, and it's going to be fun to see because there are a lot of guys on this team that are very easy to root for, like, and cheer for. So it's going to be a fun playoff run, hopefully, and I can't wait to see it all unfold. There's nothing better than playoff hockey on off the wall hockey. So
Hey, yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate that. Absolutely. It's going to be phenomenal. Hopefully the Bruins are able to keep that up and have a full, we've only played 10 out of 56 games. Hopefully we have a strong rest of the regular season as well. And the teams will hopefully be firing on all cylinders heading into those playoffs, which are so, so important now for the Boston Bruins. But we've talked a lot about the team so far this season and over the past week and everything that's happened. Now I want to shift our attention ahead a little bit as we look at the Bruins' upcoming schedule. And the first thing on the docket is a Friday night matchup against the Philadelphia Flyers. Again, the second game in this particular set against Philadelphia. What first game was unbelievable. What are you expecting here in this second one?
I'm expecting more of the same because the Flyers are similar to the Bruins in the sense that they play hard, they never give up, and they have multiple scoring weapons, so to speak. I think this is a rivalry. We talked about, what rivalries can being in the same division create. I think
Yeah.
this is definitely a rivalry in this division. I mean, the Flyers have a ton of scoring opportunities. They have a ton of toughness. I do think I would like to see the Bruins, get a 2-goal lead or at least score the first goal and not have to come back. But I would probably expect a game similar to the one that we saw on last night. I think there's just some certain teams that you expect to have to battle with every single time you play them, and the Flyers are one of them for the Bruins.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you hit the nail on the head when we talk about teams that, rivalries that might really build up and be renewed because of the new divisional alignments. Boston and Philadelphia is certainly looking like one that really could become a full-blown rivalry for this season while they are in the same division for a year. And we're already seeing it with the games that they're playing, the physicality in the games between the teams. We're already seeing it really become a great rivalry. And I'm really interested to see what the Flyers look like in this second game because I feel like it can go one of two ways after such a devastating loss for Philly last night with, having the 2-goal lead in the third and then blowing it. The Flyers are either going to come out with a massive, massive effort on Friday night and really try and take it to the Bruins and make up for that loss, or they're going to completely roll over and die. And they're just going to that loss is just going to be too much for them and they're not going to be able to come back from it and it's going to be mentally exhausting and they're just going to roll over and Boston's going to steamroll them here in the second game. I'm really interested to see what kind of pushback this Flyers team has and how they react to that devastating loss. And, whether they come back pushing extra hard or if they just completely check out and are on to the next series there for Philadelphia. That's going to be something to watch, in my opinion, in this Friday night game.
Yeah, and they have the veteran skaters to really kind of set the tone early. You talk about a guy like James Van Riemsdyk. He has, 15 points and, 10 assists and 5 goals, and he was not a player that I thought was going to make an impact this early with this much statistically, but he's getting the job done. And then you also have players like Kevin Hayes, who scored a goal last night, I believe. And
Yes.
um, so these Flyers do not necessarily have the flashiness of, say, the Tampa Bay Lightning, but like the Bruins, they do chip away, and they do have players that can get pucks into the net. So I'm expecting a tough game on Friday because that's just the way the Flyers play. If it was a back-to-back set with Boston, I could see them kind of rolling over and being defeated, but having a chance to kind of rest and take everything in and watch film, I expect them to come out, all systems go on Friday.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. It's going to be interesting to see what does happen and which way it goes, but I am expecting a huge effort from Philadelphia on Friday. Boston has won all three games that these teams have played so far, And Philly does not want to make that four and lose four in a row to the Bruins. So I'm expecting a huge effort from the Philadelphia Flyers on Friday night. I'm expecting a very close game. I think it's probably going to be a one-goal game again. And it's going to be a massively fun one to watch, that's for sure. And I can't wait for it. The Bruins were supposed to play Buffalo after they finished up against Philadelphia on Friday. They had a game on Saturday and a game on Monday. However, both of those games have been postponed because Buffalo is going through a bit of a COVID issue right now after playing the New Jersey Devils last weekend, who have their own COVID issues of their own. So Boston's going to get a little bit of a break here and a little bit of a rest. No game on Saturday or Monday, which means Boston's next game is not until next Wednesday, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I wanted to ask you what you thought about this rest here, this little bit of a break that the Bruins are going to get now. Do you think that that's a good thing for Boston, or do you think they would have rather just kept rolling along because of the momentum that they have right now?
Short term, I think it's disappointing just because of the momentum that they have right now. But when you talk about the end of the season and the playoffs, those games start to add up. The grind of the schedule starts to add up, and I think the rest will be important for them long term, just to give their bodies a break. And this is a very tough schedule. We're seeing, like I said, back to backs and games every other night. So short term, I would have loved to see them keep getting the momentum going and keep playing hard. But I think these next couple of days off could do wonders for their bodies.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, obviously, I think the Bruins would have loved to just keep rolling, and they have all this momentum right now. They've got a great point streak going. Um, what's that up to? Is like 7 game point streak now for
Yeah.
Boston? Um, they're playing really well. I think they would have loved to just keep going along, carrying on, and keep that momentum rolling. But at the same time, in a condensed season, with a tough schedule, I think the rest is going to really help them long term. And it's not a bad thing to get a few days off, and it's going to give their bodies a chance to heal and recover. And then they'll pick up on Wednesday night, starting a series against the Rangers. And I absolutely think that long term, like you said, it's probably going to be a good thing for the Bruins to get that little bit of a break here. And that brings us into the next Bruins game that they will play after Philly on Friday is Wednesday night next week against the New York Rangers, starting up a 2-game set with the Rangers. They haven't been all that great to start this year, although they've been playing a little bit better as of recent. They've had a lot going on with the Tony DeAngelo situation, which I don't even really want to get into. That's a
Nope.
whole other thing. But it hasn't been the start that the New York Rangers hope to have this season. How do you think the Bruins match up against New York, and what should we expect in that Wednesday game?
I would expect the Bruins win in that Wednesday game. Again, it'll depend on how they come back from sort of the extended rest.
Yep.
Really, the only Rangers player that worries me is Artemi Panarin. I mean, he is a tremendous goal scorer, and he just watching him handle the puck, it's really fun to watch. I remember in 2019 watching him with Columbus during the playoffs when the Bruins played them, I believe it was,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just very impressed by what he brought to the table because he has a very good wrist shot and he's able to move so well with the puck. So he's only my only real concern when it comes to the Rangers. I think the Bruins should be able to take care of business there, and I would have definitely loved to have had this weekend with Buffalo because I think the Bruins probably could have taken care of business there as well. But you know, this COVID uh, thing definitely is serious and gets in the way of things now. So
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, looking at from what I've seen from the Rangers this year, obviously there is talent there. There's a lot of young talent there. But in the games that I've watched of New York, they are a disaster in their own zone. They're an absolute disaster in their own zone, and Boston has got to take advantage of that. They have, even in the game that the Rangers won on this past Monday night against the Penguins. The Penguins should have had 5 or 6 goals because the Rangers were just turning the puck over all the time, and Pittsburgh didn't take advantage of it, and the Rangers went on to win that game. And now, for if you're Boston, you have to take advantage of those turnovers. When the Rangers play poorly in their own end, you have to take advantage of it. And I'm with you. I do expect a Boston Bruins win. They should beat the New York Rangers. They're a better team than the New York Rangers. And obviously, they should be well rested as well after, having that break because not playing the Buffalo series. They should be well rested, have a lot of energy, and be ready to go for that series. So I also am expecting a Bruins win on Wednesday night against the New York, and I think the Bruins can really take advantage of the Rangers' lapse in play in their own zone. And that's something that I would definitely look for on Wednesday night.
Yeah, and these are the types of games that you have to take advantage of, especially in
Yep.
a tough conference with Washington and Philadelphia. You're going to have a hard time with Washington and Philadelphia, so you need to take care of teams like the Rangers. They can't take this game lightly, and I don't think they will, but it's easy to kind of sometimes play down to the competition, and they
Yep.
can't afford to do that, especially not this year.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. So, Boston, a little bit of a lighter week coming up here because of the postponement of the two games against Buffalo. So, they play Philadelphia on Friday, then they get Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday off. A nice little break there for the Bruins. And then they play the Rangers on Wednesday night, and that will be the last game before we record next week's episode here. So, that's going to bring us to the end here of episode 6 of Black and Gold Weekly. And I really want to thank you, Danny, for taking the time to do this. Really, really appreciate having you on again, man. And it was a great episode. So much fun talking Bruins hockey with you.
Absolutely. It was a blast, and just keep on producing great episodes. You're doing a great job, so I'm honored to be on the show.
Hey, thank you, man. I really, really appreciate that. Remember, everyone, this show is in partnership with Black and Gold Productions, LLC. Phenomenal website, blackandgoldhockey.com. Great staff of writers getting out articles every single day. Also, a tremendous podcast network of all different Bruins-related podcasts that you can find on that website as well and listen on your favorite podcast platform. Really want to thank all those guys at Black and Gold Productions for the tremendous support of me in this show and allowing me to do this. And what a week for the Boston Bruins. Also, remember to check out those affiliate links down in the description, guys. We've got Bruins gear, we've got NHL gear, we've got NCAA college gear. You're going to want to check it out if you're in the market for any of those things. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching. Really, really appreciate all the support. And what a week, like I said, for the Bruins. They got another big one coming up with a couple important games, and we'll see you next week for episode 7. Excited for that one already, but this is the end of episode 6. Thank you guys all so much again, and I'll talk to you guys next week.